My name is Clark Morgan. Well, since I'm giving a presentation today, we are at this festival here. Sometimes I go by my alias, Milton Murray Holland. Milton Murray Holland is actually a Civil War soldier, a black Civil War soldier that came from this area. And sometimes I portray him, so Milton Murray Holland is my alias sometimes. We often refer to the USCT, United States Colored Troops. We are a black regiment that fought during the Civil War time. That war, officially known as the War of the Rebellion, actually had some 180 to 200,000 black men to fight for the Constitution of this country, for the freedom of some, for the equality of others, but to work and do their part, serve their country for the betterment of the whole country, but especially for the black man and woman. Well, ever since this country became a country, even prior to, blacks have always volunteered their service for the military. And coming up to the time of the Civil War period, at the onset, or even before the war even started, there were black regiments or black unofficial regiments, groups of black men all across the country, but especially here in the state of Ohio, who was gearing up, getting ready for when the war started, they could render their service to the government. But they ran into resistance then because, and I paraphrase it, but it's been stated by several prominent white governors and politicians and people of authority that this was a white man's country and the white man would fight to defend the country. They didn't necessarily want the service of the black man. But yet still the black man knew that if he fought in the Civil War, that would probably legitimize him being equal, or not necessarily trying to prove he's equal, but all other rights that every other human had living in this country. So that was the main reason a lot of blacks, especially from the state of Ohio, fought. Not to get their emancipation, or not to get their freedom of being emancipated, even more so as before the war, when the war started, when it came to such a time that blacks were enlisted into the army, that they had to prove that they were a free man prior to the war started. Not a newly runaway or newly emancipated individual, but he had to be whether born free or had been emancipated free at the time the war started. And so they did not go to the war necessarily for their freedom, but for freedom of others and equal rights of themselves and other blacks living in the state of Ohio and across the country. I often refer to Ohio as a smaller U.S., and we're here in the southern part of Ohio now. We had a lot of blacks who was living here were previously slaves, and it was concentrated here. Coming over the Ohio River, they felt though Ohio not being a slaveholding state that they were free. So a lot of enclaves of blacks was in this area here. But one individual in particular that I follow a little bit is migrant from Texas into this state here is Milton Murray Holland. And Milton Murray Holland, his uncle or father, whichever one, I haven't been able to determine, was having possession of him at the time, emancipated him, and he came to Ohio with his two brothers to learn the trade. Milton Murray Holland himself, the trade of shoemaker. And he was studying the trade of shoemaker when the war broke out up in Athens, Ohio. And he joined some guys together, and he wanted to go join the military. But at that time, when the war first started, they turned him down. Not knowing that he was a mulatto, they turned him down because of his age. But Milton Murray Holland wanted to serve the country that he lived in so badly and fight for the rights of all men that he took a job with a white regiment, and then that he learned military bearing. I didn't mention it earlier that his father and uncle was in politics back in Texas, so he learned how to politic, for lack of a better word. And so when he gathered these 50 or so men together in Atherton County fairground, they ultimately made him the little informal leader of that group. And that group was ready to go to Massachusetts because Ohio was not yet accepting blacks into the service, but Massachusetts was, and they had established the 54th and the 55th Massachusetts. And the Battle of Fort Wagner just had taken place, and if anyone has ever seen the movie Glory, you know that's when they marched into the fortification. They did not successfully take the fortification, but they did prove themselves as valored men and ready to fight, to do whatever was asked as a soldier for their country or for the stabilization of this nation. And so Milton Murray Holland was eventually convinced to stay here in the state of Ohio and not go to Massachusetts and join up with them. He was persuaded by a man named John Mercer Langston. who's real familiar with this area here. John Mercer Langston actually came across from Virginia at that time, across the Gallion County ferry, and came into Gallipolis. He stayed here just for a day. He went on up to Jackson, Ohio, and from Jackson, Ohio, went to Chillicothe, Ohio, which was actually the first capital of the state of Ohio. And eventually, John Mercer Langston became the first black to practice law in the state of Ohio. And he's also believed to be the first black man elected to a government official, a government office in the state of, in the whole country. Anyway, he was the chief recruiter. And that's the reason why you had so many black men from Ohio fighting in Massachusetts. It's believed to be 18 to 20% of the men who fought in Massachusetts was actually from Ohio. And he made sure that Milton Murray Holland was not going to add to that number. So he recruited Milton Murray Holland along with his 50 or so guys, and they became the basis for the black regiment in Ohio. It initially started off as the 127 OVI, 127th Ohio Volunteer Infantry. A color bureau was established, and what the color bureau consists of, it regulates the activity of the black soldier. The officers have to go through a special training school, and the men have to are handpicked, both the officers and the men themselves, for those early black regiments that came in. Even so much so that it's believed that the black the first few regiments were more educated than the white regiments at that time, in general. And as far as the pay, they were not going in for pay. Most of them, as I said, they were already free, so they already had an income, they already had jobs, they had farms, there were shopkeepers, there was blacksmiths, there were cooks, there were tailors, all forms of work they were doing already, so they were not going in for the pay itself. As a matter of fact, one of the soldiers is noted for saying that they did not come to the war to argue about how much they were paid. For those who don't know, the black soldier was only receiving $10 a month, whereas the white soldier was receiving $13 a month. And that came from a previous term and a law that went into effect called the contraband law. And under the contraband law, $10 was a fair amount of money to give to somebody rendering their service to the military. But it was not never established that that's what a soldier should get. But they used a loophole in that because they were black soldiers. They only paid them the $10 a month. Eventually, that was rectified. I think it was a great impact. I think it was probably the common denominator that ended the war, is the black man fighting. The black man did not fight in any wholesale large number for the South, for the Confederate cause. Had that been so, had they would allow those black men to fight down there, I think it would have been a different outcome of the war. And for the 180 to 200,000 blacks that fought for the United States government, I think it tilted, it gave that fresh blood, it allowed those white soldiers for the government to go home, and a lot of them were going home anyway. There was a high desertion rate. I think that spirited on to the Emancipation Proclamation. And the unit that I portrayed, the 5th USCT, we're known to have never lost a man to desertion, which is a big thing because a lot of the white soldiers were deserting. They were ready to go back home. As I was about to state, on the onset of the war, no one thought it was going to last this long. A few months and everything would be back to normal. Going back to the official name of the war of the rebellion, you know, the Lincoln administration thought they was going to come in, put down a rebellion, business as usual, and going back home, but it lasted a lot longer than that. What they thought was going to last 3 or 4 months actually lasted 4 years. And so attrition was a problem there. And so they needed those black soldiers there. Initially, I like to think a lot of them was just doing it as an experiment and to free up the white soldiers to not to do as much of engineering or tedious work like that, and to get them on the battle line. But whatever the case was, they proved that they were willing to fight and could fight well. And they eventually got their chance. And going back to the Confederate side, we hear the argument that there were black Confederates, but we don't have any record showing that there was a black Confederate soldier. They helped in capacities of teamsters, body servants. Even when they rode in with the cavalry, there's a maneuver in the cavalry, they pair up in fours. And when that cavalry gets dismounted, one guy stays with the horses. And a lot of times that fourth guy that stayed back with the horses would be that black guy when he was involved with the cavalry. they were cooks, they were all kind of positions like that, Teamsters, but they were not gun-toting soldiers. And even though some received pension for their service to the war when it was over with, but yet and still they were not a bona fide soldier. And the North had their issues with that too. Even here in the state of Ohio, they had certain restrictions to black people who lived in the state of Ohio. When we received our state charter for statehood, blacks could not sit on a jury, they could not testify against whites, and they could not bear arms in the state militia. And that was one of the reasons that Governor Todd was toying around with or playing with to try to keep the blacks out of the military, because he really was not a friend of blacks. And he used those reasons right there why not to do it, but also politically. And there was the Irish community down in Cincinnati who had said that they would riot if blacks would join the military. And I think that was a bigger factor as what was on paper as far as what the state ordinance and Constitution say we can and cannot do for the state of Ohio. I think it will continue to live on. I think it will continue to be strong. This area here, you have several enclaves throughout the state of Ohio. Another one being Oberlin, where a lot of the officers came from Oberlin University. I think it will continue to live on. I think, but this program that we're having today is especially important. The Emancipation Celebration, to keep that alive. And I go across the state, I go across the nation, and I think the involvement of the black soldiers is never going to go away. I think it's the movie Glory and movies like that did a lot to introduce the fact that blacks did fight during the Civil War, as they did with every other war that's been fought on this continent, and that it's kind of slowing down a little bit now because of the 150th is over with and things like that, but I think it'll always be around. Well, I think Dr. King sums it up as best anyone could and everyone except, that a person should not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And your character is what you believe in, it's what you fight for, it's the essence of who you are. And the essence of a man has no color to it at all, or black or white. And the black men during that period of time wanted the same thing that the white men wanted, same thing they want now. You know, they want to provide for their family, they want to live in peace, they want to provide for their children, they want to just enjoy life. And the black soldier didn't want anything different than that, especially those black soldiers who was already free, earning their income, but they knew that they would not totally be happy unless their brothers and sisters that looked like them would have that same equal right to do that. And that's why the soldiers, most of the USCTs was fighting. After the war got started, sure, a lot of them came in and added to the ranks and to the regiments as they were in the field. But those initial black soldiers fought because they considered themselves equal with anyone else, equal to the white man. And I don't think that's ever going to go away. No matter how it gets tried to get suppressed, it will always come up, because there really is no difference, you know. And an individual has no choice on what his skin color is, but he has every choice about his character.